Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads. I have read some interesting books this week. I kind of went a little more self-help, which is typically something I kind of avoid. So I'm excited to talk about these books with you. And as always, I have an embroidery update. So I have been working on my coloring book, Picture of Jesus, and I really am loving the effect. It's looking so cool. So far, I've got here, filled in a lot of the sky. I'm missing out on some colors. I need to go shopping. I've been using up the embroidery floss that I have to start out with. So I'm just kind of filling it in and I'm having so much fun with it. So far, I'm really excited about this project. I can't wait to see where it goes. But for now, let's jump into the books. Now, this first book was a recommendation from the channel Triumphal Reads, so I will make sure to link that down below. And I've heard a few people talk about this book. I kept kind of putting it off. It is called Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End by Atul Gawande. And this book is a practicing surgeon talking about some of his experiences and some of the history behind elder care and how it has become increasingly medicalized and what options do people have as they grow older to keep their own autonomy and to live a meaningful life as they get into their later years. And this book was fantastic. I loved it. It wasn't super self-helpy, but I feel like I want to recommend it to anyone who is aging or has aging parents, or basically anyone should probably read this and come to terms with what they want their lives to look like in 10, 20, 30 years. What are your goals? How do you find meaning for life? It has those important questions that you need to talk to your loved ones about. Like, if you were in an accident, what does a good life look like to you? What measures would you want hospital staff to take to save you and to help you? And I think that these are really important discussions. The author approached this from a very personal perspective, talking about his experience with his own father. In making some of these medical decisions, you could see how important it was for him to be able to talk with his father about what did he want out of life, what was going to make his last years meaningful. And his father was able to say, you know, if I am going to be paralyzed and unable to move, I don't know if I want to keep going. And so knowing his father's wishes helped him to make the appropriate decisions for and with his father toward the end of life. Something I really took from this book was where it talked about how we often want autonomy for ourselves, but safety for our loved ones. And I think this is really important to look at, because when you are making decisions for an aging parent, for somebody in your life, you want to keep them safe. And sometimes you have to allow someone to be able to have a few more risks in order to give them the autonomy that they need in their lives. This book just had a really clear look at what end of life looks like, what hospitals do, what hospice is, and these important questions that everyone should grapple with. So I highly recommend it to basically everyone. I thought it was really well done. I love nonfiction. I love biographies. I love history books. I love really great investigative reporting. I think there are so many good nonfiction books. But there is a genre of nonfiction that I typically avoid. Books that are gonna tell me how to live my life. I just get annoyed. But as evidenced by the last one, I don't know if I would put that completely in the category of those self-help or telling me what to do, but it definitely had suggestions on what I should do in my life, and I thought it was good. I thought it was necessary. And so it's not to say that those books are never helpful, but sometimes it's just a certain genre of nonfiction that makes me roll my eyes. Now, I read the book Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. Now, this book is going through the science of breathing. how our health is impacted by how we breathe and how it influences our physical health and our mental health. And this book had some really interesting things, but it started out with a lot of things that you feel like you agree with. They are not difficult things to agree with. I take a yoga class. I like the deep breathing. I like being able to think through breaths. I think those are important strategies. But I can basically sum up the first half of the book in breathe through your nose. If you're breathing through your mouth, stop it. It can cause cavities. It can cause all sorts of issues. And some of the issues that the author says it can cause seemed a little overstated. But yes, it's probably better for you to be breathing through your nose. Does that feel correct to me? Yes. Did he have some evidence that was very strong supporting that? Yes. But some of his evidence was, yes, according to this study, and the study was 2 guys wearing nose plugs for a week. Some of the science felt a little weird. And then we get to the last half of the book where it kind of lost me. If the book had stuck to, here are some different cultures' takes on breathing and what people have said can be helped with it, yeah, that's fine. But the author kind of fell on the side of feeling a little bit pseudoscience-y to me. Very, you could probably cure all of your illnesses if you learned how to breathe correctly. And I think that can be kind of dangerous to tell people. There was a disclaimer at the end of the book that this is not medical advice, but I didn't love that. And he's going into all of these interesting breathing techniques. People who say, oh, well, I don't need drugs because I can do this kind of breathing that puts me in this altered mental state. And okay, I don't know. I would like to see some real evidence on that instead of just, oh yeah, and then I went and did it and this was cool. It just felt weird. And then he had this whole section of this kind of breathing that it can basically cure your anxiety if you're putting yourself into a panic attack. I'm sorry. I am not purposely going to put myself into a panic attack. I don't know about you, but if I have one panic attack, I am much more likely to have more panic attacks sooner after. It's like a pattern gets stuck in my head. I'm sure his reasoning behind, oh, you have to intentionally do it to break the cycle, I'm sure he believes that, but it just didn't feel very grounded in fact or as well researched as I would like. I think that he did use some good studies and some good research, but also a lot of kind of crazy stuff, and I just don't love that. But it did have some nice ways to get into more meditation, and it did give you that reminder of breathe through your nose. But I am also very biased to already agree with that point. I am a person that I cannot sleep if I can't breathe through my nose. So I'm already agreeing with him. So why did I read this book? So it was interesting. It had some ideas that were interesting, but I think the way that it was presented, instead of saying, look at these cool ideas that cultures have had about what breathing can do, versus kind of telling you that if you were breathing right, it would cure all of your asthma and everything else, I think that's overstepping just a bit. So this kind of book is not quite my cup of tea, but I did focus a lot on my breathing during that, and sure, that's fine. And for another book in a similar genre, I read Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What We Can Do About It by Jennifer Brenny Wallace. Now, this book is talking about modern parenting, especially in more affluent communities, and how it is just putting so much pressure on children and putting their worth based on their achievements, and how it is damaging the children and the parents and their bond together. And I agree with all of that. I think it was really good in that it did show, okay, here are the problems and we should change this. it does kind of fall into the trap that I feel like a lot of these kinds of books fall into for me. I can agree with everything going through it, but when I get done with the book, it hasn't actually changed any of my behavior. So I say that, but while reading this book halfway through, it says something about, as a parent, you need to make sure that you are having your own support system and your own friendships. And I did go out and contact a few friends that I hadn't talked to for a while, and great, that's sure, it did something. So I'm not going to say that this book is necessarily all bad. I think if you are in a point in your life where you feel like your children are overcommitted, or you as a parent are feeling like your self-worth is attached to your children's successes, this book could be really good for you. But for me, it was things that I kind of agreed with going into the book. And so I don't know if it necessarily will make a lasting change on how I parent, but I think they're important ideas. So I would kind of just say, this might not have been my book, but I could see it being a really good book for somebody. Now, Caitlin at Bandy's Books recommended the book Friday Black by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. It is a collection of short stories through a few different genres. We have kind of sci-fi, just some fiction, some kind of horror type things. These are really interesting stories that are going to talk about the justice system, race, family. It's a collection of short stories. Now, did some of these work for me really well? Yes. Some of them were really great. Did some of them give me the ick? Yes. I cannot read any book that deals with cannibalism. I'm not gonna I don't like that. But there were some stories in here that I thought were really good and had some interesting layers to them, and some stories that just didn't work for me. And so if you like short story collections and you don't mind them being a little more experimental or a little out there with those sci-fi elements and can have some really disturbing moments, I think that this had some really poignant things to say in the way of societal critiques. I just had some mixed thoughts. And Caitlin, you did warn me about that. I think some of them were really good, and I am glad that I read them. There were just a few that I'm like, yeah, I want to unread that one. So it has been an interesting week of reading. There were 3 books that were in kind of the section of nonfiction that I avoid. There was 1 short story collection, and honestly, 1 book just stands out. I loved Being Mortal. I think that was just an excellent book. It will probably end up in some of my best nonfiction of the year. The other ones, I think, suffered from being maybe the right book for the very wrong person. So if you have any thoughts on these books, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all on the next one.